So now, when people are buying coffee, they're not only buying coffee. It's not just about fair trade. It's not just, I mean, it's much more. It's cash, it's food, it's jobs, and it's women, and it's also helping in avoiding AIDS. That means you're building values for yourselves as companies. You're building values for the people who really need it. And you're also enabling them to help themselves. So it's not always dependent on what the guy who's up here is doing. It's not always dependent on what my grandmother is doing, but I can be able to help myself. You can go to the next one. So, sorry, a little bit back. So we have been able to reach out also in places like Congo with the Heineken. We're able to reach out to Cameroon through the Sara Lee Foundation. And we are inviting people to join and make sure that we keep sharing this. The next one. If we can be able to use all the waste from the coffee, the grass clippings, the maize stover, and all the other agricultural waste, we can be able to generate 50 million jobs and 16 million tons of food. Because for every, I mean, it's amazing the returns you can get from a ton of, let's say, coffee waste. You can get at least half a ton of mushrooms. And this is something that happens within a very short period of time, and you don't require any special techniques to do it. It's really simple. I always say that, but yeah. And so we're inviting you to say, well, we don't need to get, pieces of bread or cloth or whatever. We want to be able to get something that can enable us to get that bread for our own selves, or even make it, and not to have handouts being given to us. We want to be able to just stand for ourselves with very little help from you. And so I would like to end by inviting those of you who will be able to support the work in Zimbabwe to continue the culture of orphans teaching orphans, women standing up for women, because I personally feel that it is the easiest way to reach out to them. It's different when he steps up and say, well, you can grow mushrooms and you can get food, and he's wearing a nice suit, he's really clean and he looks well fed. Then I would ask him and say, are you only saying this because you're full and you think I will be able to do the dirty stuff and impossible? But when I go to them, we sit there, we talk, we sing, we dance, and we connect. And it's much easier to start talking about other things when you can provide food and you have that connection of coming from the same situation. It's much easier to bring up the change. Thank you.
Thank you. Is this working? Yeah, it is. Thank you so much, Chido, for that contribution. I'm very proud of having to learn to know Chido, and I loved her work so much. I had the great honor and privilege to adopt her, and she has become my daughter.
But I don't stay with him because I prefer staying with my people and helping. So he helps me, and I share that. That's a level of selflessness that you don't find yourself in a position of privilege and keep that to yourself, but you share. So that's also one thing that's very important to me.
Wonderful. I usually say, give the world 10 of these women and so many of the problems we men generated will be out of the way. You know. I'm glad that one of the gentlemen is clapping here as well. In the room, we're just only women clapping. Eddie, from your point of view, you have been Eddie Ayensu, who is a biodiversity expert, who's a man with such a vision, who has done so much in his own country. He worked for the World Bank, he worked for the Smithsonian Institute, he's a Sherpa at the G20. Eddie, when you have lived through so many decades, maybe even 4 or 5 decades.
Don't
so
let
many,
people know that
but knowing how many decades you've been working for African development, in the framework of the questions what we have here before us, what are the incentives that are needed? Is Chido the exception, or is this the real opportunity for Africa?
Thank you, Gunter. First of all, let me say this. What Chido has been doing and all the oratory that Gunter presented to you earlier, let us get down to brass tacks. Number one, all this work is being done within countries, with governments, with private sectors in various countries. Now, how do we get countries to create a congenial atmosphere to make it possible for the entrepreneurs to operate? It's not an easy proposition. But let me say this. If you really want to entice the business community to come in, it is important that the government takes a leadership role in creating the environment by way of strategies, by way of policies, to make it possible for the business community to operate. If you look at the continent of Africa, you are dealing with perhaps the largest market left in the world today. The potential to turn that continent that has been sleeping for a long time into gold is there. We have a continent, the population is just about 1 billion. A continent that can literally absorb major land masses around the world today. But we do have some serious problems that could be solved with the help of what I think are better models involving joint ventures of one form or another. You would notice that during the past 50 years, a lot of the African countries have been changing. Governance is beginning to take root. The political climate is getting better. Rule of law is taking root. We cannot turn the fortunes of Africa round if we continue to do what we've been doing for the past 50 years.